The worn-out recliner groaned under my weight as I finally sank into it. Another day, another stack of overdue bills. The familiar hum of the refrigerator in my tiny apartment was the only sound, a constant reminder of the quiet, almost too quiet life I'd cobbled together since the desert. My head throbbed, a dull ache behind my eyes that aspirin barely touched anymore. PTSD, they called it. I called it a daily boxing match with my own brain. My old rucksack lay slumped in the corner, a relic of a past I desperately wanted to forget, but my body just wouldn't let me. I pushed myself up. The closet. It was more than a closet now, much more. I walked over, my movements stiff, heavy. The old mirror, the one the landlord had left behind, reflected my drawn face, the dark circles under my eyes. I pushed it aside, and there it was. Not a wall, not a space, a void. A deep, swirling darkness that seemed to swallow the light from the room. I'd found it weeks ago, tucked behind a loose panel, mentioned in my grandfather's rambling journal, a feverish account of some impossible discovery. He'd talked about a garden, about growth. I'd dismissed him as mad, until I saw it myself. I needed cash, badly. The phone had rung non-stop. Medical bills, credit cards, the loan shark. I closed my eyes, picturing a thick wad of $100 bills, crisp and new. I reached into the dark. It wasn't cold, not warm, just nothing. And then something was there. My fingers closed around a stack of paper. I pulled it out. Hundreds. Exactly what I'd imagined. I smoothed one of the bills, feeling its surface. It was new, all right, but there was a strange softness to it, an almost wet warmth. Not like paper at all, more like some kind of fine, tanned hide. I frowned, turning it over in my hand. Brand new money. Why does it feel like leather? I muttered to myself. I sniffed it. A sweet, almost cloying smell, sickly sweet, not like paper or ink, just different, unsettling. But I was so damn broke, so damn desperate, I just shrugged it off. Probably just a new anti-counterfeiting measure or something. Yeah, that had to be it, I told myself, over and over. The relief hit me like a tidal wave when the last bill was paid. The phone stopped ringing. For the first time in what felt like years, I could breathe. I even managed a real smile, a genuine one, when I next saw my reflection. The space? It was a miracle, a goddamn miracle. I started planting other things, fresh vegetables, fruits, cuts of steak that looked marbled like something from a five-star restaurant. My health, my energy, they came roaring back. The constant, gnawing anxiety in my gut began to recede. I felt alive again. But the relief, it came with a price. A subtle one at first. I started spending more and more time just thinking about the space. What else could I grow? What if I tried something bigger, better? Sarah, my girlfriend, called sometimes. She'd ask me to go out, to a movie, dinner. I'd make excuses. Too tired, not feeling well. She started sounding worried. My job search, that stopped altogether. Why bother when I had this? I told myself I was just taking a break, regenerating. I deserved it after everything. Then came the vegetables. A deep red apple, plucked from the void. It gleamed, dew still clinging to its skin. I ran it under the tap. a faint metallic tang rising from it. I took a bite. The flesh was crisp, juicy, but after the initial sweetness, there was that metal taste again, stronger this time. And then, a sensation, like a tiny, rhythmic squeeze in my mouth, deep within the pulp, as if something inside it was twitching. I instantly spat it out, a glob of half-chewed apple hitting the sink. I stared at the bitten fruit. It wasn't just the bite mark. There were tiny, stringy lines, visible now in the raw flesh, thin and pale, but they seemed to pulse ever so faintly, like thin veins. My stomach lurched. "What the hell?" I whispered, pressing a hand to my mouth, trying to get rid of the metallic, faintly meaty taste. I dropped the apple into the trash, tried to forget it. It was probably just some weird parasite. Or maybe I was just stressed out again. Yeah, that's it, stress. That night, my sleep was a suffocating mess. I drifted into a feverish dream. I was lying in a field, but the ground wasn't dirt. It was soft, yielding flesh, warm and damp. My legs, my arms, they weren't limbs anymore. They were roots, stretching deep, binding me to the earth. All around me, grotesque figures rose from the ground, trees with human bodies, branches that ended in splayed hands, twisting upwards like praying supplicants. I could feel myself swelling, my skin stretching, becoming taut, shiny, like a ripe fruit ready to burst. And I heard a sound, a low, guttural thrumming, vibrating through the meaty ground beneath me. I woke up with something stuck in my throat, a choked scream. My God! My entire body was slick with sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs hard enough to bruise. I pushed myself up, my muscles aching. I felt wrong. I peeled back my shirt, my skin. It was different. Small, livid bumps, an ugly bluish gray, had erupted all over my chest and arms, like tiny hardened nodes. I touched one, my finger recoiling. It was soft underneath, pliable. Not a rash, my God, not a rash. No, this isn't real, I mumbled, my voice hoarse. Just a nightmare, a really bad dream. I clenched my fists, pressing my palms to my eyes, desperate to make it disappear. But when I opened them, the bumps were still there, stark against my paler skin. And from the corner of the room, from the direction of the closet, a faint, sickly green light pulsed, rhythmic and slow, like a heartbeat. It was watching me. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. It was Sarah. She sounded distant, her voice tinny through the speaker. "James, are you okay? You've been off lately. And there's this weird smell in your apartment. Can you smell it? Like wet earth, but also something else. Something metallic." I stiffened. The smell, it had been there for days, or maybe weeks, clinging to my clothes, to the air in my apartment. I'd blamed it on old pipes, on the dumpster outside. But now, hearing her say it, suddenly a thought flashed through my mind, unbidden. The space, it needed nourishment. It had always needed something from me, and that something was getting hungrier. My eyes drifted to the window. Old Mrs. Henderson's little terrier, Buster, was romping in her yard, a fluffy white ball of boundless energy. He often trotted into my yard, curious, friendly, a source of food. The phone fizzed, a sudden burst of static.
Sarah's voice disappeared, replaced by a low, grating whisper, distorted and slithery right through the receiver. Yes, food. My blood ran cold. My hand spasmed, dropping the phone. It clattered to the floor, dead. I stumbled backward, away from the silent phone, staring at it like it was a venomous snake. I looked out the window again. Buster was still there, fetching a stick, playful, innocent. My thought. It had been heard. I swallowed, my throat dry as dust. The room seemed to grow heavy, the air thick and still. The only sound was the frantic thump, thump, thump of my own heart, echoing in my ears. It knew. It heard. Every thought, every impulse. A cold dread seeped into my bones, colder than the deepest winter. The fear, it was a living thing now. I couldn't just brush it aside, or blame it on stress, or bad apples, not anymore. My skin, the bumps had grown slightly, itching, and when I scratched, a clear, viscous fluid oozed out. Old scars, faint memories from the war, seemed to deepen, turn a sickly crimson. And the veins on my forearms, they weren't just swelling anymore. They twisted, snaked under my skin, thick and gnarled, like roots burrowing beneath the earth. I knew. I just knew. I picked up my grandfather's journal again. The old leather cover, brittle and cracked, felt almost warm against my fingertips. I flipped through the faded pages, past the frantic scribbles, the nonsensical diagrams. I stopped at a particular drawing, a crude sketch, almost childish in its simplicity, yet horrifying in its implications. It was my house, my apartment specifically. But the walls weren't walls. They were depicted as a mesh of pulsing organs, raw and glistening. The floor, a lattice of bone and cartilage, interlocking, twisting. And right where my closet stood, a gaping black maw, a massive, grotesque tree-like entity erupted from it. Underneath, a single scrawled line, written in a shaky hand. The root, it consumes all. It hit me then, a sickening wave of realization. This wasn't just a house. It wasn't a home I owned. It was a part of something else, something growing. And I was not the owner. I was just there.
A fleeting thought of going to Sarah, telling her everything, died a quick, painful death in my mind. Who would believe me? Why would I even risk her? I found myself back at the closet, my hands trembling as I reached for the door. A deep, guttural sound, like a wet sigh, seemed to emanate from the other side. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. But I had to see. I had to. I pulled open the door. It wasn't a dark void anymore. The space inside, it had changed, swollen. It was a gaping, throbbing orifice, stretching deeper than before. From its depths, thick crimson tendrils emerged, writhing and pulsing, like immense arteries or roots, extending, reaching. They seemed to dance in the sickly green light, coiling, uncoiling. And from far, far within, a low, rhythmic thump, thump, echoed. A sound that wasn't just in my ears, but seemed to vibrate through the very soles of my feet, resonate in my chest, like the heartbeat of something impossibly vast, of a living thing, a colossal, alien heart beating in the core of my apartment. I just stared, my breath catching in my throat, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. I stumbled back, my eyes wide, tearing themselves away from the horrifying spectacle. My hand fumbled for the journal, knocking it from the bedside table. It landed open, face down, on a particular page. I picked it up, my fingers shaking. The last page. It was covered in a frantic scribble, a desperate final entry, written in what looked like dried dark blood. And it looked fresh, like it had just been written. It needs time. It needs flesh. It's waking up. No more pets. The words blurred before my eyes, twisting, forming into grotesque shapes. The thump, thump from the closet grew louder, seemed to intensify, now perfectly synchronized with the terrified pounding of my own heart. Faster, stronger. It wasn't just a sound outside me, it was inside me too. It always had been. I woke up to the smell first. Not the metallic tang of the apple from days ago, or the sickly sweet rot that clung to my apartment like a second skin. This was fresh, a damp, earthy smell, like a rainforest floor after a storm, but laced with something else, something deep and bloody. My chest felt tight, itchy. I climbed out of bed, each movement a conscious effort. It was a chore, really, just to exist now. I grabbed the deodorizer spray, the strongest industrial stuff I could find, sprayed it on my clothes, sprayed it on my skin, over and over. The chemical scent mixed with the other smell, twisting it, making it even worse, like a flower blooming in a butcher shop. I frowned, shaking my head. It had to be my nose, right? Just getting used to it, or maybe it was damaged somehow. You know, from the dust, the explosions, from that damn dream. I didn't dare look in the mirror anymore. Not really look. Not at the veins under my skin, now thicker, darker than ever. The doorbell rang, startling me. It almost never rang. Sarah. My heart seized up. She knew. She had to. The smell, the way I'd been acting. I ran a hand over my face, trying to compose myself, trying to push down the rising panic. "Coming," I yelled, my voice a little too loud, a little too strained. I opened the door, trying my best to manage a weak smile. Sarah stood there, her eyes wide, scanning me, then the apartment behind me. She was wearing her favorite blue sweater, the one I used to love. Now everything just felt wrong around her. "James, oh my God, the smell," she said, her voice dropping. She stepped inside, cautiously, like she was entering a different house entirely. It's like wet earth, but also something else, this terrible sweet smell. Her gaze drifted to the kitchen wall, where I'd tried desperately to scrape off the patches of mold. It wasn't normal mold. It grew in patterns, intricate and disturbing, forming shapes that looked disturbingly like organs. Little clusters of something fleshy, pulsating. "What is that, James?" she asked, pointing a trembling finger. "And what are you growing in your garden?" Just a bit of damp, you know, how old these apartments are," I stammered, grabbing her arm, trying to pull her away from the kitchen. My hand felt cold against her wrist, so cold, and her arm, it felt so small, so fragile. I felt a chill then, a wave of cold air washing over both of us, not from the window, from inside. And from the closet, a faint, dry creaking sound, not loud, but distinct.
Like someone slowly opening an old, rusty door. Sarah shivered, pulling away from my grip slightly. "Just damp, huh? James, look at yourself," she said, her eyes fixed on my face, then my hands. "And you hardly ever call anymore. You're different. A whisper, so faint I almost missed it. Right in my ear. Or was it in my head? Soon, fresh food. My breath hitched. It was talking to me, through me. I swallowed hard, forcing a laugh. It sounded hollow. Look, Sarah, I've just been real stressed. The PTSD, the bills, it's a lot, you know? I tried to pull her closer, but she resisted. Her eyes were searching, looking for the James she knew. She wouldn't find him. He was fading. Stress doesn't make mold look like kidneys, James, she said, her voice cracking. And what's wrong with your hand? She reached out, gently touching a faded scar on my knuckles, one I'd gotten from a fight in the desert. It felt hard, cold, like a sliver of bone poking through. I flinched, pulling my hand away. Just, old injuries acting up, I said, trying to sound casual, trying to laugh it off. It was getting harder. Every lie felt like a stone in my throat. Every breath felt like razor blades in my lungs. I felt a buzzing inside me, a low hum that seemed to grow stronger with her presence. She took a step back, her eyes fixed on the bedside table. My grandfather's journal. I'd left it open. Idiot. Absolute idiot. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the faded, almost illegible script. "What's this?" she asked. "Your grandpa's old diary? Didn't you say he went a little off?" I wanted to snatch it, to burn it, to bury it. But I couldn't move. It was like I was stuck, rooted to the spot. The hum in my chest intensified. Sarah's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. The harvest, the cost of life. "What is this, James?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The room, then, it truly came alive. It started with the floorboards, a slow, rhythmic thudding, not like footsteps, but like something pushing up from underneath. The sound of wet slaps. The lights in the apartment flickered, shifting from a normal yellow to a sickly, unnatural purple. The air grew heavy, thick with that sweet, bloody smell. And then the whispers began. From the walls, from the ceiling. Dozens of voices, overlapping, indistinct, like a crowd murmuring just beyond a thin curtain. They weren't speaking words, I understood, but the intent was clear. It wanted, it needed. Sarah dropped the journal. It hit the floor with a thud. Pages splayed open. She was staring at the closet door. It wasn't closed tightly anymore. A thin sliver of that green light, pulsing like a distant heart, escaped from the gap. "James," she said, her voice a terrified whimper. "What is happening? What have you done?" The silence that followed was worse than the whispers. It stretched, taut and agonizing. And then, from the closet, a low growl. Not animal, not human. Something deeper. And a branch, thick and fleshy, began to slowly, deliberately, push its way out of the gap. It was not wood. It was like a colossal, twisted root, glistening with something clear and thick. It coiled, extended, and then, with a wet thwack, placed a pulsing, heart-shaped mass of raw meat onto the floor. It was still twitching, beating, like it had just been torn from something alive. I took a step back,
my eyes fixed on it. It throbbed there, a silent demand, a larger sacrifice, a call for something more. My blood pounded in my ears, mirroring the faint thump, thump, thump coming from the closet. The veins on my arms, they throbbed too, pushing against my skin, looking like they were about to burst. "No, no, I can't," I choked out, my voice ragged, my fists clenched, my knuckles white. A tremor ran through me. This was it, the line. I couldn't cross it. I wouldn't. But then a peculiar sensation, not an emotion, not a thought, but a pressure, a consensus building from within me, like something was reaching up from my gut, wrapping around my mind, whispering assurances, justifications, a terrible clarity settling in. My eyes drifted to the large mirror in the living room, the one I used to only catch glimpses of myself in. My reflection stared back, and a slow smile spread across its face, wide, too wide. It wasn't my smile, not really. I turned away from Sarah, from the pulsating heartbeat on the floor. I ran, just ran.
Out of the apartment, down the stairs, out into the street. The air outside, it felt wrong, too clear, too loud. Every sound, every passing car, every distant shout, it assaulted me. I stumbled, almost falling, my legs not quite obeying. I had to get away. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling. Sarah, I needed to tell her, to warn her, to beg for help. "Sarah, get out of there! You have to leave!" I yelled into the receiver, my voice hoarse, desperate. And then, through the phone, her voice. No, not hers, mine, my own voice. But it was delayed, slow, distorted, like it was dragged up from a deep, putrid well, thick, slithery. "You have to leave," the voice whispered, echoing my words, but with a horrifying, drawn-out quality, like a corpse trying to speak. My hand spasmed. The phone slipped from my grasp, hitting the sidewalk with a faint clatter. It lay there, dead. I stared at it, at the other people on the street. They walked by, oblivious, casual. No one paused. No one looked at me oddly. Did no one hear it? Did no one see me stumbling around like a madman? I brought a hand to my mouth. My lips felt stiff, dry, numb, no feeling. It was like they weren't mine anymore, not real. I wasn't just trapped in a twisted reality. I was becoming a faded echo of myself. The exhaustion hit me then, a heavy blanket pressing me down. What was the point? There was no escape, not truly. I just stood there, on the sidewalk, watching the mundane world go by, feeling myself drift further and further away. I walked back, slow, heavy, each step a concession. The front door was still ajar. I pushed it open, the apartment greeting me with that same insidious purple light. It was worse now, so much worse. The bedroom. It wasn't a room anymore. The fleshy branches, thick as my forearm, had burst through the walls, snaking across the ceiling, twisting, coiling. They pulsed, a faint green light emanating from their skin. The floor beneath my feet was soft now, yielding,
like damp, rotting earth, or something else, something alive. I looked at the large mirror. No, not a mirror. It was a window to something else. My reflection. It wasn't quite me. My eyes were black holes, no pupils. My skin was mottled, bluish-gray, covered in those livid bumps. And on its shoulder, a hand. A bony, gnarled hand, its fingers long, skeletal. It was resting there, casually, possessively. And on its ring finger, a familiar gold band. My grandfather's wedding ring. A sound, not a voice, a feeling. A deep, direct understanding vibrating in my core. Welcome, home. Not my home, not my body. I was him, or something far, far worse. Weeks passed, or maybe days. I didn't keep track. Time had become fluid. Everything was fluid. The walls of the apartment writhed with a slow, pulsing rhythm, like a sleeping beast. The floor, once rigid, now sagged slightly underfoot, a spongy, cartilaginous mass. My old sofa, my recliner, they were gone, replaced by a grotesque mound of glistening flesh from which thick, root-like tendrils, disturbingly shaped like human limbs, burrowed deep into the floor, feeding on something unseen, unheard. A heavy, rank odor hung in the air, a mixture of fresh blood, damp earth, and some cloyingly sweet, alien pollen. It was everywhere. It was in me. I looked at my hands, fingers elongated, sharpened, nails cracked, dark. I touched a wall, a section where the flesh tendrils had woven into a complex, shimmering pattern. No disgust, just a familiar sensation, like touching my own skin. Thump, thump. It wasn't just from the closet anymore. It was everywhere, from the walls, from the floor, from deep within my own chest. A colossal, alien heartbeat, living in me, breathing through me. I smiled then, a wide, slow smile. No feeling behind it, no joy, no sorrow. Just acceptance. Utter, complete acceptance. Finally, I whispered, my voice deep, raspy, heavy with something not my own. I found peace. There was no fight left, no desire to resist. I had dissolved. I was a part of it, a bridge, a conduit, a gardener. Weeks later, perhaps months, Sarah stood on the sidewalk outside my apartment building. My calls had stopped, all of them. She knocked, no answer. The door wasn't locked. It just swung open with a soft, wet creak. She stepped inside, her nose wrinkling at the stench. The apartment was different, horrifically different.
The walls pulsed, a sickly green light filtering through the gnarled, fleshy growths that choked every surface. The air was thick, heavy, a grotesque flesh garden. Her eyes landed on the living room table, an old book, my grandfather's journal. She walked towards it, her movements slow, deliberate, as if she were in a trance. She picked it up. Her fingers brushed against a dark, sticky stain on the brittle cover. Blood? She recoiled, but the book was already in her hands. She opened it. The last pages were covered in a frantic scrawl, a crude drawing. It was me, my face distorted, my body covered in roots, and beneath it a single feverish line, written in what looked like the same dark, sticky substance. I am the new gardener. A voice, low, deep, not from the walls, not from the air, from everywhere and nowhere, right in her ears or in her head. Welcome to our home, Sarah. A shiver ran through her right wrist, where she had touched the stain. A faint itch began. She looked down. A small, pale green dot, a tiny bud, forming on her skin. She knew. There was no escape. The cycle had begun again. Not just James's legacy,